on the crossover along with Steiny and Evan, you said that you felt like the Niners are at least going to seriously consider trading Brandon Aiyuk this offseason because of the cap situation, because of Aiyuk reportedly being frustrated with the 49ers, because of the other holes on the roster. The Warriors can get high draft pick back, most likely, in return for bringing in. What did I say?
You said Warriors.
Oh, the Warriors. I've been on the Warriors.
We've had Warriors on the brain.
The 49ers can get a big first-round pick back in return for him. You actually think that's a realistic possibility this offseason? The Niners moving off of an all-pro wide receiver, a young one at that.
I know. Well, the Niners situation's interesting, too, because they have their own cap. We're talking about the Warriors and their cap situation.
Oh, they're in cap hell, too, aren't they?
The Niners head into this offseason, they're about $7.5 million over the projected cap. Partly due to $5.5 million of leftover Trey Lance dead money that they can't do anything about. So, and if they did an extension for Aiyuk right now, that would help their cap situation. It would spread out his money. He's due to make $14.1 in his fifth-year option, which would also be his cap number for this year. So if they can extend him, that would drop his 2024 cap number maybe from $14 million to like $4 million. I mean, they could drop it by that much. The problem is that you look around the league, and it's been really tough for teams to find common ground with their star wide receivers. And Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Pittman Jr., T. Higgins, none of these guys have really signed big money long-term deals yet. And the Niners, I think they have options. They can restructure Trent Williams. He makes 31.5. They can reduce him, they say, by as much as 17 and rework that. Debo has got a cap number of 28.6. They could reduce that by as much as 15 million. But then you're extending, when you reduce a guy's cap figure, you're guaranteeing him money into the future, usually extending his deal. And I don't know that they want to do that with Debo. So, this is going to be a very difficult situation for the 49ers. I think they're going to probably wind up cutting Kyle Juszczyk. I think that's probably very, very likely. There's a chance they're going to wind up cutting Dre Greenlaw, which is not what I want to see, but that potentially could happen. Yeah. And if they can't reach an agreement... Cutting Dre Greenlaw. I hate to say it, but it could happen. And if the 49ers can't reach an agreement with Brandon on an extension, they are going to wind up having to trade him. And they would save the full 14.1 on his 2024 salary. And we've seen this move before. A.J. Brown and other receivers have found their way into the trade market.
Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek Hill. There's a great article out today on ESPN, Grandi, by Dan Graziano. And Graziano says the most likely outcome is, he says, the most likely way this shakes out is Aiyuk ends up getting traded to a team where he's the clear number one wideout, where he can get the extension he wants, and that would leave the Niners to draft his replacement in the first round this year. So
if the Niners trade Aiyuk, I feel like they shouldn't be drafting. I mean, I guess they could draft a wide receiver in the first round, but I mean, they've got holes that they would need to fill elsewhere as well. And I feel like you could use what you get for Aiyuk to maybe pick a right tackle or defensive lineman or another corner, or I don't know. But
it's hard to imagine them, replacing him in the draft in the first round. I agree with you because of what you just said, all those needs. It's also really hard to envision them paying, $50 million to Debo and Aiyuk when they're 32nd in the league in pass attempts. Yeah. I mean, nobody passes less than the Niners. So you're gonna commit that much to your receivers? I don't know. I would, I love Aiyuk. I'd rather move off of Debo than Aiyuk, but Aiyuk's clearly going to fetch more. So, maybe the New York Giants are going to have some interest. They have the 6th pick in the draft. The Raiders have the 13th pick in the draft. They're probably likely very interested. Kansas City is looking for a veteran wide receiver. There's probably a couple other teams, Buffalo, a couple of teams that will be looking for for wide receivers. So it's just a matter of, can they? It's kind of like the Greenlaw, the Buckner-Kinlaw deal, where they had to kind of decide between Buckner and Armstead, and they chose Armstead and moved Buckner for Kinlaw. I think in this situation, since they have Juwan, he's restricted. They just signed Debo to an extension. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to keep Aiyuk. I really do.
So, and I think what you brought up 4 years ago was the decision to trade Armstead or to trade Buckner, re-sign Armstead because Armstead was going to he made less. You could sign him for less than you were going to pay.
They also
Buckner
signed
for.
Jimmy Ward as part of that. So,
and then you got a draft pick that you used to replace that guy, and that has largely been thought of as a bad decision. So I feel like the 49ers making that move 4 years ago, that's fresh in their minds still, and the Niners are not. That was really the only time where a guy they've drafted who turned into a stud that they didn't re-sign. Like in this era, that's the only one. Because, you have Bosa, you have Kittle, you have Debo, you have all these guys. Now Aiyuk is next in line. Buckner was the one that didn't get the big deal, a guy that you handpicked, has been a Niner their whole career, and then it comes time to pay them, and they decided against it because many reasons.
Buckner had hired Joel Siegel, who was kind of like the Boris football agent.
And it wasn't a one-for-one deal. It wasn't, he also allowed you to get Jimmy Ward back and all of that. I get it, but the Niners have never been in the business of trading away all-pro talent, and I feel like the last time they did it, it bit them in the backside, and they do not want to have that feeling once again.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that great players are acquired through draft picks, but people only think of they don't think about the failure rate in draft picks, right?
Yeah.
So, you got DeForest Buckner with a top 10 pick, and you traded him a few years later for a pick that was also in the middle of the first round. That was okay. But then you took Javon Kinlaw, and Kinlaw hasn't become DeForest Buckner.
No.
So you
had a decent year this year.
He had a decent year this year, and he's a good dude. But I mean, it's just that, that's why I feel like if they move Aiyuk, they have to get more than one pick because you don't know if you're going to hit on those picks. And then the question is this: if, let's just say, the New York Giants were willing to give you the 6th pick in the draft, and you were sitting there now on the clock at 6, and the Giants have Brandon Aiyuk, okay, what do you do? Do you take Malik Neighbors, a wide receiver, and try to replace the wide receiver you just lost? Or do you use that, 6th pick in the draft to take, Joe Alt or Fashanu or one of these offensive tackles where you have a severe need, and usually the tackles go in the first half of the first round. So it's going to be, and then, Jerry Rice's kid is in this draft. Christian McCaffrey's brother, the receiver at Rice, is in this draft. There are some receivers that I think the 49ers would probably like to have that will not be in the first round. And maybe they'll go offensive tackle in the first round and try to get Rice's kid in the 3rd round or something like that. But is Jerry Rice's kid, I like him, and he was good at SC, but he's not Aiyuk. You know what I mean? He's not Brandon Aiyuk. And it would be really tough to look Brock Purdy in the eye and say, hey, by the way, we want you to be better this year than last year, but we're taking away your number one your in route. He throws a lot of in-breaking routes to Aiyuk.
Oh, they have such a great chemistry.
They got a great
together.
chemistry, yeah. So it's like, and then whatever receiver you get, even if you think Malik Neighbors is better than Aiyuk, he still hasn't built that chemistry with Purdy, so it's going to take some time.
It just feels like when you still have Brock Purdy on this incredibly team-friendly deal.
One more year of that.
A year from now, you can start negotiating it, right? A year from now, you can. Right. It won't take effect for another year after that, but you can start negotiating it a year from now. It almost feels like the Niners, they just got to get through the next couple of years and give it their best shot, which is why the timing of this potential Aiyuk trade could be so frustrating because you still have the Brock Purdy, the friendliest contract in all of sports, like the biggest trump card in all the sports. We've got an all-pro quarterback who's making $800,000 a year, and it allows us to keep all these other players. And then you consider if you have to make a move like that, trading Aiyuk to get off of some money and to keep the team around, then what happens when Purdy comes due for a contract? How does the roster shake out then? I know that's a few years down the road, and, Kittle's getting up there and Trent Williams, maybe he's retired by then, all of that, and it opens things up. But if they're having this much trouble keeping this talent together now, what happens when Purdy is due $35 million a year or whatever the number ends up being a year from now?
Yeah. No, I mean, that's why that's where the urgency comes from. You talk about the 49ers have showed all this urgency this year. Yeah, because they know.
It's coming.
The clock is ticking.
Yeah.
And they've got a deep, loaded roster with a quarterback on a rookie deal, and they're desperately trying to climb that Super Bowl mountain while they have the quarterback on the rookie deal. Even just talking to some of the 49er people, were they committed to Trey Lance? No, they were never really committed to Trey Lance. What they were committed to was a quarterback on the rookie deal.
A young, cheap quarterback.
Yeah, because they saw what their they put together. They did a little exercise, and they did their roster with a $20 million quarterback when they were considering, picking up Aaron Rodgers or Cousins or any of these other veterans.
Brady.
And then Brady. And then they're putting that next to the roster that they can assemble if they have a quarterback on a rookie deal, whether it be Trey. In this case, it was Brock. And that's what they're committed to, and they've got one more year of that. So it makes their decisions this offseason, not that they weren't urgent before, but they're incredibly urgent because if they're going to get this done before Purdy's contract explodes, it's got to happen next year.
Which is what made this Super Bowl loss so difficult to swallow.
Yeah.
Because you had everything set up for you, and you didn't have to face any of these questions until now.
And Purdy played well. I mean, there was a big question going into the Super Bowl. I know, there were lots of people that were concerned. Would the moment be too big for Mr. Irrelevant?
It was not.
And it wasn't. It wasn't. And that was the positive takeaway from Super Bowl Sunday is that the Niners know they've got a guy who can operate in that game. Now, I know Skip Bayless is going crazy today, taking Shanahan and Purdy behind the woodshed and just crapping on all over them. But I think that Purdy kind of proved that the moment wasn't too big and that they got the right guy. Now Shanahan's got to fulfill his side of the deal. I thought Shanahan made some questionable decisions. I didn't like getting away from the run, so on and so forth. I think we've beaten him up a little too much on taking the ball in overtime. There's a great stat out today from a guy who crunched all the numbers saying that, it's basically the same chances of winning, whether you go first or second. And so maybe that was a little bit overblown as far as all the criticism Shanahan's gotten. But he did, 3 Super Bowls now. He's fallen and gotten a little pass happy and gotten away from the run.
Yeah.
And he did it this year with McCaffrey, who's MVP of the league almost?
Yeah, Offensive Player of the Year and an MVP finalist. And he didn't get, I think, nearly as many touches, specifically runs, as I thought he should in that third quarter alone. Maybe a trade of Aiyuk. It signifies belief in Brock Purdy that, this is a quarterback who can do it without all the elite talent around him offensively. Who knows? It's going to be an interesting offseason. We can get more into that